It's 1947. In a prison in Guatemala City, a doctor is paying a woman who has syphilis to visit the male inmates. The men think they've gotten lucky. They don't know she was infected on purpose. They don't know the doctor is watching to see who gets sick. And they don't know that the doctor works for the government of the United States. This is one of the darkest medical experiments in American history. And for more than 60 years, almost no one knew it happened. Between 1946 and 1948, doctors from Public Health Service deliberately infected people in Guatemala with sexually transmitted diseases. Not by accident, on purpose. Syphilis, gonorrhea, chancroid. They infected prisoners. They infected soldiers. They infected patients in a mental hospital. And almost none of these people were ever told what was being done to them. There was no consent. There was barely even a lie to cover it. There was just the experiment. The man running it was a doctor named John Cutler. Cutler worked for the same public health service that, back home in Alabama, was already watching black men die of untreated syphilis in the study we now call Tuskegee. But Guatemala was different. In Tuskegee, the doctors let a disease run its course. In Guatemala, they started the disease themselves. The goal sounded almost reasonable. Penicillin was brand new. They wanted to know if it could stop an infection right after exposure, before it took hold. To test that, they needed freshly infected people, so they made them. And this wasn't one rogue doctor. The study was funded by the US government through the National Institutes of Health. It was approved by senior officials. The Surgeon General of the United States knew about it. In fact, one American health official wrote that they could never get away with an experiment like this back home, where people might ask questions. Guatemala was chosen precisely because they believed no one would. At first, they tried the simplest method they could imagine. They took women who already had syphilis and paid them to have sex with prisoners. But not enough men got sick, so the doctors got more direct. They took the bacteria and applied it straight to the body. They scraped the skin first, the arms, the face, sometimes the genitals, and then wiped the infection into the wound. They put it into injections. Cutler's own records describe it in cold, clinical detail. These were not patients being treated. They were surfaces being infected. The people chosen had no way to say no. Prisoners, soldiers under orders, and most vulnerable of all, patients in Guatemala's National Psychiatric Hospital. People the doctors assumed no one would ever ask about. One of them was a woman the records call Berta. She was a psychiatric patient. Cutler infected her with syphilis. When she grew sick and was dying, he did not stop. He infected her again. He put gonorrhea into her eyes and other parts of her body and recorded what happened as she declined. She died soon after. In all, more than 1,300 people were deliberately infected. At least 83 of them are believed to have died. So how did this stay secret for 60 years? Because it was never published. The results were inconclusive, and the whole thing was quietly buried in a filing cabinet. Cutler kept his records, but he never released them. For decades, they sat in an archive at the University of Pittsburgh. Then, in 2010, a historian named Susan Reverby was digging through Cutler's old papers, researching Tuskegee, when she found something she wasn't looking for. Notes describing a second study, one where the same doctor hadn't just watched. He had infected people on purpose. When Reverby's discovery went public, the reaction was immediate. President Obama personally called the president of Guatemala to apologize. The United States admitted it had happened. A commission investigated and called it ethically impossible, something that could never be justified. And yet, it wasn't done by monsters in secret. It was done by respected doctors, with government funding, who believed they were advancing medicine. That's the part that should keep you up at night.